Hello, everybody, and welcome to another NHL Free Agency video from the guys here at Review and Preview Sports. My name is Noah Dibler, and today we're going to be getting into probably what is the biggest signing of NHL Free Agency so far. That is obviously Johnny Gaudreau signing with the Columbus Blue Jackets on a massive deal, $9.75 million AAV for I believe the next 8 years. I'm going to get the contract up real quick in a second, but what a deal, man. There was a lot of interest in Johnny Gaudreau. He had talks with the Philadelphia Flyers, who were his hometown team. I believe the Devils were in there and the Islanders as well. But in the end, he decides to sign with the Columbus Blue Jackets on a 7 year, $68 million contract, which, like I said, roughly comes out to $9.8 million, specifically 9.75 if you want to get technical about it. But real quick, before we get into more specifics, just want to give a shout out to our social media here at Review and Preview. The guys do a great job and work very hard on them. We're on Facebook at Review and Preview Sports, Instagram at Review and Preview, which is where they typically do stats of the day, did you know type of stuff. Twitter at Review Preview 1, Anchors, where our podcast is, anchor.fm/Review and Preview. YouTube, its channel at Review and Preview Sports, and they're also on TikTok at Review and Preview. So real quick, getting into Johnny Gaudreau, this is the first free agency signing I've done. The last two videos on Malkin and Kane were actually re-signings. So when I do this one, I want to talk about the cap situation for both the team that the free agent left and the team they're going to. So first, I'm going to talk about the situation for the Calgary Flames as I put this up real quick. Let me put it full screen. There we go. So the Calgary Flames, they have a lot of cap space, actually, $18.45 million under the cap, salary cap of $82.5 million. And the reason I think they let Gaudreau go to free agency, is Matthew Tkachuk. As we see here at the very bottom, Tkachuk is an RFA this year. They want to re-sign him to a massive contract. And he was great last year. He scored 100-plus points just like Gaudreau did. He's a power forward as well, so he's great at hitting, blocking shots, fighting. That's his game. And I think in the past years, the main thing with Tkachuk is not only has he elevated his scoring, he's also decided to do dumb stuff a lot less. Like I remember him, a few years ago doing a lot of dirty hits, getting into fights where, he got his butt kicked, quite frankly. And, just being, for lack of better words, a hooligan, a piece of what, if you know what I mean. And I think he started to mature a bit. He was a kid, when he was doing that stuff. Now he's 24. He's getting to his, first big contract extension, I think. I think he's starting to find his game, mature a bit. And if he wants a contract to upwards of $10 million, which you would expect with $18 million in cap, if they sign Gaudreau to what he wanted, they'd only have maybe about 8.5 left in cap space, if not less, maybe even $8 million, depending on the contract Gaudreau wanted, which probably would not be enough for what Tkachuk wanted. So I think the main thing for them, their choice was between either keeping Gaudreau or keeping Tkachuk. And to me, and I agree with this decision, I think you keep Tkachuk because he's 5 years younger. He's still an elite scorer, and he has that physical edge to his game as well. So I think that's why they let Gaudreau go. But real quick, getting into the contract side for the Blue Jackets, who did actually sign Johnny Gaudreau, I think it's an interesting signing for a couple of reasons. First of all, Gaudreau is a winger, and in the past two drafts, the Blue Jackets have had 5 first-round picks, but they spent 2 of them on centers and I believe 3 of them on defensemen, none of them on wingers, which when I was watching drafts, I was a little surprised by. Don't get me wrong, I think centers and defensemen are definitely the harder team, but I thought they would take at least one winger. They did not. So I think they resolved that by getting in Gaudreau as their superstar winger signing. $3.1 million in cap space for the Blue Jackets, so it's definitely manageable for them. They have control of all their major picks the next 3 years, which is also beneficial for them as they have been rebuilding. And last season for the Blue Jackets, they actually surprised me. I thought they'd be, one of the bottom 3 teams in the league, but they were actually, roughly point per game. They were not close to making the playoffs, but they had some promising moments. And bringing in Gaudreau, who's, a superstar winger for them for the next 7 years, is definitely beneficial for them. That's a superstar signing that elevates their offense to a whole new level. The main thing for them, this Voracek contract, $8.25 million for the next 2 years. He's just not worth that. I mean, Voracek used to be a very good player for the Flyers. He is not at that level anymore. That was a contract they took on to, just because they wanted, to get another big contract on their books to get closer to the minimum salary cap. Now, as they start to sign players and they're going to have big RFAs coming up the next years, that's a contract that, luckily for them, is only 2 years, so they can get rid of it very soon. Gustav Nyquist, $5.5 million. Bjorkstrand has $5.4 million for the next 4 years. But other than that, most of their contracts, Roslovic, $4 million for 2 years. It's a shorter term contract. Corrali, $2.5 million is very manageable. The rest of their contracts are very manageable. But they do have a few big RFAs coming up in the next few years, and they are drafting, like I said, 5 first-round picks in the next 2 years. You're going to have to worry about giving those guys contracts in the next 4 or 5 years as well. Patrick Laine is a big RFA for them. We'll see what happens with him if they tender him and, try to get draft picks when another guy tries to sign him, or maybe they will try to re-sign him, make some moves to clear some salary cap. But they're going to have to if they want they sign him. I mean, he's not going to just want $3 million. He's going to want very upwards, maybe even $6-7 million if I had to guess. I mean, the guy's a gifted goal scorer. When he has his A game on, that's the big thing with him. He can be a bit inconsistent. On the defensive side, they have Werenski locked up long-term to a massive contract. He's only 24. He has a ton of potential. And he's an alternate captain on the team. They're placing a lot of faith in Werenski, and I think he's a very good player, very promising player. So we'll see if he can start to, continue to develop and live up to that big contract. Gudbranson, $4 million for 4 more years. I think that's a bit too high for Gudbranson. I think for the most part, he's had moments where he's played like a top 4, but for the most part, I think he's more of a top 6 defenseman for his career. Gavrikov, $2.8 million for 1 more year before he's a UFA. This is an absolute steal of a contract. Adam Boqvist for 3 years at $2.6 million AAV. They traded Seth Jones and his terrible contract to the Blue Jackets. They got a young defenseman in Boqvist who's only 21, and they signed him to a very cheap bridge deal as well. I thought that was fantastic business for the Blue Jackets, both in that trading Seth Jones and also, all the picks they got back they made from him and this re-signing. I thought that was very savvy business by the Blue Jackets. Jake Bean, another young guy as well, has 2 more years left before he's an RFA. And then, just a couple of depth defensemen here in Peak, Bayreuther, and Blankenburg. Another main question I have for the Blue Jackets is in net. Ever since they've let Bobrovsky go, which Bobrovsky had his playoff struggles, but since then they've been trying to find their franchise guy. Elvis Merzlikins and Jonas Korpisalo have been battling for the past years for that spot, and it looks like it's gone to Merzlikins. They've committed to him long-term, 5 more years at $5.4 million. Whereas Korpisalo is a UFA after next year. I think Elvis has had moments where he's looked very good, but he's a bit inconsistent, I would say. He needs to develop into more of a franchise guy, if you will. If I look at his stats real quick for his career, a .913 save percentage, 2.88 goals against average is decent, but last year it dipped a bit to a .907 save percentage, 3.22 goals against average. Now, a lot of that is down to his defense. I mean, I think people look at save percentage, goals against average solely to, evaluate whether goalie is good or not. I don't think that's quite right, because I think his defense definitely struggled last year as well. But what I'm saying is he's not a franchise goalie by any means either. He needs to, take that next step, to develop, or maybe they need to look at other options, but they've committed long-term to him. So I think it's definitely going to be more towards the former, and they hope that he continues to develop well. I mean, goalies can play. I mean, they develop well into their mid-30s, early to mid-30s. So 28 is not an old age for a goalie by any means. We'll see what happens there. They also have some guys on injured reserve. Boone Jenner, their captain, he has 4 more years at $3.75 million. Texier and Tarasov as well. They also have 4 years of dead cap for Alex Winberg. So I think the situation for the Blue Jackets is very manageable. I mean, if they can try and figure out what to do with Laine, and if Voracek is gone in 2 years, I think it'll open up the cap a bit, and they can try and re-sign some of these guys that are coming up as UFAs or RFAs. Cole Sillinger was the guy they drafted, and Ken Johnson as well, both drafted in the first round in 2021. Those 2 centers that I mentioned they drafted, those will be guys they definitely want to, give contracts to. So we'll see what happens with the Blue Jackets, but I think on the surface, actually real quick, before we get off here, I do want to show Gaudreau's stats real quick to show just what he is capable of And one of the major criticism against his game is his playoff production. Now, regular season, he's phenomenal. 609 points in 602 games for his career. Career point per game player is always very impressive. He's won in Art Ross as a leading point scorer in 2014, 2015. He had 115 last year, 40 goals, 75 assists. He was a plus 64, which I believe led the entire league. 14.7 puck shares is absolutely incredible as well. He had 9 game-winning goals. But the main thing against Gaudreau, the main criticism people will use, and I think it's a fair criticism, has been his playoff production. Now, he was a little better last year, 14 points in 12 games, but he was still a -3. In his playoff career, he has 33 points in 44 games played, 11 goals, 22 assists, and he's a -11. 45 giveaways as well compared to 33 takeaways. He does not hit or block shots. He's not a power forward. He is a pure playmaker / sniper. He can do a bit of both. Whereas, like I mentioned earlier, if we look at a guy like Matthew Tkachuk, who is almost 5 years younger, he had 104 points last year, which, yes, was 12 less than Gaudreau, I believe, or actually 11 less, excuse me, but it's still well over 100 points, well over a point per game, excuse me, 42 goals, 62 assists. He was also a plus 57, which, is not far behind what Gaudreau did last year, 13.7 point shares as well as 6 game-winning goals. But like I said, these are the stats of a guy who is almost 5 years younger. And, I think that's what the Flames are looking at by letting Gaudreau go is, well, if we have to commit to one guy and the choices between Gaudreau or Matthew Tkachuk, you're going to go Tkachuk because, he's much younger. His contract is more manageable because he's an RFA. You can tender him if you really don't want to re-sign him, which I don't think that's a possibility. But there's a lot more freedom with an RFA instead of UFA. So that's what I think the Flames were thinking there. But letting Gaudreau go, I think it's an interesting signing for the Blue Jackets because they have not drafted a winger the past 2 years. They drafted centers and defensemen, and now they get their superstar winger. So I think in the next few years, if the Blue Jackets draft picks develop, which I think they will because the Blue Jackets usually draft very well, I think they're going to be right in the mix in the Metro in the next few years once again. I think the rebuild has looked very good so far. Real quick, once again, before we get off here, follow us on our social media, Facebook at Review and Preview Sports, Instagram at Review and Preview, Twitter at Review Preview 1, Anchor, where our podcast is anchor.fm/Review and Preview, YouTube at Review and Preview Sports, and TikTok as well at Review and Preview. Wish all the best to Johnny Gaudreau. He's an American player. He's from Jersey, actually, funnily enough. Always really liked him. I have a soft spot for the Flames as well, former Atlanta Flames. Anyone that knows, I'm a big Atlanta sports guy, so I hope both sides do well. Gaudreau on the Blue Jackets and the Flames. We'll see how it works out in the next few years for them. But once again, this has been Noah Dibler from Review and Preview Sports. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We will be back with more NHL Free Agency content very soon. Until then, thank you for watching.